Hey guys, thanks for joining me today. Today we will talk about REST API using a Springboard. In order to understand REST API, we have to understand some of the prerequisite, which is very much needed in order to understand REST API. Also guys, if you are new to the channel, then please subscribe to the channel and like, share and comment on videos. Okay, so let's start. What we will do is for 5 minutes we will go for a theory part where we will discuss about some of the terminology like web service, different types of web service, and some of the basic principle of web services. So REST API is nothing but it's a web service. Okay, so we'll talk about more about this in first 5 minutes, and then we will go for practical. So guys, you must have done transaction on Amazon card using credit card or net banking or uh, debit card. So you must have done all this. So basically, Amazon is one application, and the credit card from certain bank is another application, correct? So Amazon will not have your credit card information like how much amount is available and all. So your banking system will have all those details. So what is going to happen is basically Amazon will make a call to your banking system and will go for transaction, correct? So in this complete scenario, if you will see, then you will find there are two different system on different technology or maybe same. Communication needs to happen on network and applications, and this communication is application to application communication, or you can say system to system communication. Request is something where information sent by client machine, and response is something where information sent by the server machine. So in this sort of communication is called web service, where two applications will communicate with each other. You might have used ATM, correct? So there might be the possibility you have HDFC ATM card and ATM machine is of SBI. Correct. So SBI ATM will not have HDFC customer detail. Correct. So what it is going to do is basically there will be a web service call from SBI system to HDFC system in order to get information like how much amount is available, and based upon that you will able to debit the amount from SBI ATM also. So web service is something where two application will communicate, and this is very important nowadays, because what happens if you are developing an application, it is impossible to develop all the component by yourself, correct? So let's say you are developing something like a online management sort of application, and for that you wanted to give you want to give facility of online payment, correct? So it is very difficult to again develop your own application for maintaining those transactions, and also there are so many vendors today for who are providing this transaction functionality. You just make use of that. Or let's say if you have an application and you wanted to have a navigation system in your application, then you are not going to design map by your own, correct? You can make a web service call and you can make use of Google Map, correct? Again, these all needs to be something where in some of the cases you have to pay the service provider, in some of the cases it is open to use. In web service, request response format needs to be in a way so that both client and server can understand data exchange. Most extensively used format are XML and JSON. There are two very familiar request response format. One is XML, extensible markup language, and JSON, JavaScript object notation. There are two types of web services mainly, and those are SOAP based and REST. SOAP SOAP is simple object access protocol. It uses XML as request response exchange language, a specific XML structure for request and response. Service definition. So in SOAP there is something called service definition. So in service definition you will find how request response is structured, detail of endpoint, that is service provider, and many more other details also you can find. In SOAP is a sort of SOAP envelope where header and body enclosed, meta information header and body enclosed in a envelope. WSDL, web service description language, defines service definition. So basically in SOAP there is a URL called WSDL URL by which you can get all the detail of your service, like what sort of request it will accept, what sort of response you will get, what is the endpoint, all these details you can find from WSDL URL. Also, in SOAP-based web service, you have to adhere to defined SOAP structure only. Now, we will not take much time for SOAP web service. We will go for REST because our agenda is not to go for SOAP. Rather, we have to understand REST, and we need to do the practical also. So, let's start with REST. REST is something where the root of REST is HTTP. HTTP is a protocol, you might already know that. So the base of REST is HTTP, and it is representational state transfer. Actually, according to Wikipedia, Roy Fielding, one of the principal author of the HTTP specification and the originator of the representational state transfer architectural style. So what Roy Fielding thought, why to develop something from the beginning? Why not by using HTTP method develop on top of that something else? So you might have done browsing over internet, using a browser. So you have seen your request, you always request through HTTP or HTTPS. So basically HTTP is a protocol by which client and server communication will happen. Client and server communication happen through HTTP, and the most known method of HTTP is get and post. But other than get and post, there are other methods also available with HTTP. However, we will focus on four methods particularly in this video: get, post, put, delete. There are other like options and all which we will not discuss, but we will focus on get, post, put, delete because it is going to cover our crude operation. So get is, you will use HTTP get method when you want to get something from the server. You want to retrieve something from the server. If you want to post something or you want to create something on server, then you will use post. When you want to update something on server, then you will use put. When you want to delete something from the server, then you will use delete. In REST, always think of resources, and all these resources associated with URI. URI is something like uniform resource indicator or URL, uniform resource locator. So basically, let's think of employee management system. So in employee management system, you have to create employee sometimes, you have to update employee sometimes, you have to delete employee sometimes, you have to retrieve employee sometimes. So all these, whatever we are talking right now, called resources. So if you want to create employee, then you have to go for a certain URI. If you want to fetch some employee data, then you have to go for a certain URI. So everything you have to think in perspective of URI in REST. We will discuss more when we will do practical. In REST, there is no restriction for data exchange. What does it mean is you can exchange data in JSON or XML. Any format will be supported. And most known and used one is JSON. In REST, there is one challenge where there is nothing like you will have WSDL URL, WSDL web service description language. There is nothing like where you can expose that URL to the client so that client will understand what sort of request they have to send, what sort of response they will receive. So nothing like that. But there are APIs available today which you can make use of and provide service definition. One of the most known is Swagger. Best practices for REST. Each resource is in REST represented through a URI. That is one of the important note that you have to make. And now we'll discuss about how to make URI. There are 7 best principles that you need to follow in order to make a URI. So forward slash should not be at the end of URI. Hierarchical structure should be maintained. So URI needs to be in hierarchy. Okay. Use hyphen to provide more meaning to URI, but don't use underscore. Always use a small case in URI. Use plural in URI. Use noun rather than verb in URI. And sixth step is very important because you are already using different HTTP method. Like for creating some resource, you will use post. So post is a verb, and it is a HTTP method. So don't use verb in your URI. Use noun, and you have to maintain version also. That these are the best practices. Now, in this picture, what we are saying is how we can develop REST API in a Spring Boot. So right now on left hand side, you are saying client is making a call to your REST API. Actually, REST API composed of 4 layers: REST controller, service layer, DAO, and database. So basically, service layer is a bridge between REST controller and DAO. DAO is a bridge between service and database. And REST controller is the front facing controller where all requests will come. So basically when you are requesting something using URI, REST controller will send that request to service layer will send that request to DAO, and finally request will reach to the database. Similarly, in the response, first data will send the response to DAO, and from DAO to service, and finally to REST controller, and by the end client will get the response. That's how the request response processing is going to happen in REST API using a Spring Boot. In a Spring Boot, there are some dependencies that we have to use. So we'll discuss all this when we will do the practical. However, as you know, a Spring Boot is all about a starter. A starter is something where they have clubbed together different dependencies as a one package. So when we will use, basically a Spring Boot, a starter parent is very important because you will get functionality of some of the inbuilt configuration and dependency automatically invoked when you are going with parent, a Spring Boot starter parent. Also, you just have to mention the version in parent. Later, you need not to mention version specifically in other starter project. That will be taken care automatically from the parent. We'll see in our practical. Also, we will use some database. In this video, we will use H2 database, which is something like in-memory database. So rather than using some external database like MySQL or Oracle, why not use in-memory database, which is present by default by having some dependency. Okay, so and then in application.properties, these are the some parameters that we need to define in order to use database, and some of the logging also we want. And for database communication, we will use a Spring Data JPA, the language which we will use for Java Persistence API, which is most widely used nowadays. So we will use a Spring Data JPA. Okay, so without further ado, let's go to the system and start our project. Okay, so now start your Eclipse. Okay, so for a Spring Boot, as we discussed in our first video, most important thing is you have to have understanding of Maven. If you have not gone through my first video about a Spring Boot, how to start a Spring Boot, then please visit that. That will give you more idea of how to start your project in a Spring Boot. However, in this video, we will focus on REST API creation only. So what we will do is we will go for create a Maven project, and we will go for create a simple project, skip archetype selection. We'll go for next, and here we'll go for com.read, and this will be something like REST API, REST API, REST API YouTube finish. Okay, so this is our project which got created. Now one thing what we need to do is, since this is a Maven project, so we'll go for properties in build path. We'll just remove this and we'll go for add library, JRE system library, and we will go for alternate JRE. And in alternate JRE, make sure you have selected JDK, not JRE. Okay, so finish. Okay, we are good. So now what we need to do? So basically, client will always make a request to REST controller. REST controller is like a controller, only the difference is it is API, REST API. It will expose the REST API. So REST controller, then there will be service layer, then there will be DAO layer. In DAO layer, we will have repository and entities, and finally database. So in DAO layer, there will be repository. So we are going to use the Spring Data JPA. Okay, entities meaning is domain object. So let's say we are going with employee management system. Okay, so employee is an entity. Okay, so we will create, let's start from entities, and repository is something which will do DB related query. So we'll use JPA repository or CRUD repository, which is a part of JPA. So it will give us different method to operate on database. Okay. So let's start with entities. Okay. So what we will do is we'll go here and we'll go for, but before we will go for anything, just do one thing, create a starting point. So there is a starting point for each Spring Boot application. So we'll do that. We'll create the starting point. So Spring Boot starter, simple. And this starter class needs to be annotated with Spring. Okay, but before that we need to have dependency, correct? Because before dependency we cannot do anything. So what we will do is, so as I said, parent is very important, parent, and then there will be group ID and org dot spring framework dot boot, and then artifact ID, and here we will go for Spring Boot starter, Spring Boot starter hyphen, and then this is a parent. Okay, 2.4.4, I believe this is the latest version. So if you will check this, then here it is, Spring Boot starter, and then we need web also. So now we need all the dependencies. Okay, so we will go with dependency, and here we'll not need to go for version. So group ID, and then simply we'll go with web. Similarly for data JPA. So everything remains same. Here we will change data hyphen JPA. Simple. And then we need one dependency for DB. And we are all set. So it will build. Okay, now if you will go here, we'll have all the Maven dependency. Okay, why it is giving red? So we'll go here and we'll go for Maven update project and the same. Okay, now we are good. So this is the starting point. So the starting point has to be annotated with a Spring Boot application. Very good. Now main method, and from here we'll just have, we need to call a Spring application dot run method, and the class will be same as Spring Boot starter, Spring Boot starter dot class, and argument done. This is the starting point. We are good here. Now what we need to do is we have to create entity. Okay, so we'll go for new class. Here package will be DAO dot entities. Okay, and employee. So let's say we will create, we are going to manage employee. So this employee will call entity. Basically we will have a row for representation of this employee. So in JPA what you need to do is you just have to annotate it with entity. Once you annotate it with entity, corresponding table will be created into the database. Now we have to define properties, private long employee ID, and this employee ID will be the primary key. So how you will, so in when you will deal with JPA, then each table needs to have a primary key. So how you will define? Simply at ID, simple. This means it is primary key. Now private string employee name. Okay, that will be employee email, and int employee age. These are the property we'll define. Now let's have setter and getter for all those. So we'll go for source, generate getter and setter. Done. Also, we don't want to maintain track of employee ID. We just wanted to we don't want to maintain track of employee ID. We want JPA to maintain this generation also, like how unique ID will be generated. So I will just need to go for generated value. Simple. You can define a strategy also here, like how you want to go for this generation of employee ID. But in this case, we'll go with default, nothing else. So this employee ID generation, this will be a primary key and this will be generated by JPA. And employee email should be unique, correct? You cannot have something where two employee will have the same email. No. So we'll go with column and unique is equal to true and nullable is equal to false. Okay. We don't want it to be null. Okay, so these are the things that we need. I'm not focusing more in JPA because there will be a dedicated video on JPA itself. So right now I will just focus on REST API, like how to start with REST API. So this entity class is ready. Now this is all set. Now we need to have a repository, so that by repository we will communicate to the database. So what we will do is we'll create a class and the package will be dow.repo and employee repo, or we can have employees repo. Okay, so this will not be a class, actually this will be a interface. So new interface package will be dow.repo. Okay, and extended interface will be, we can use CRUD repository or JPA repository. We'll talk about more about CRUD and JPA repository in our JPA session, but right now let's go with CRUD repository. Finish. Okay, here we have to give the entity class detail which we want to manage through this repository. So we wanted to manage employee entity, so employee, and this will be the primary key data type. Okay, so the primary key data type is long in our case, if you will see here. Okay, done, we are good. So now repository entities is done, repository is done, service needs to be there. So what we will do is let's create a service class and com.read.service, and here we will create REST API service. Okay, and repository needs to be annotated with @repository. Okay, and this needs to be annotated with @service. Okay, so now we'll have a method to save employee object. So public employee and save employee, and here someone has to send the employee object, then only we will save that particular employee into the database. Here we have to use the repository. So what we will do is we will go for employee repo, and that will be auto-add here. Okay, so now employee repo dot save. So here in save we just have to give entity details. So employee, done. And when, so if you will go for this method, then when save a given entity, use the return instance for further operation. So it will return the same instance also. So we'll go with employee, and then we will go for return also. Same, it will be return. After saving, it will return the same entity. Okay, so we are good here in the service thing. Now we have to define REST controller. So class controller Spring Boot controller. Here we just have to annotate it with REST controller, and here we have to define public employee save. So we will save employee. So here we have to define URL pattern. So at request mapping and value, and the mapping will be slash employees. Okay, that will be the URI slash employees. And now method we have to define, like which method it will allow. So it will be request method dot post, because we are going to create employee. So post. Now that employee object will come through request body. From client, they have to send the data through request body. So at request body and employee object. So all this conversion of object into JSON and all will be taken care by REST, by a Spring Boot auto configuration by default. Okay. So now what we will do is, here we need to have service instance. So what we will do, REST API service, REST API service, auto wire it, and from here REST API service dot save employee return. Simple. So now we need to test it, correct? But before testing, okay, so we already defined our dependency. We have defined the classes. Now we have to define, we also defined a starter place and a starter class. Now what we need to do is we have to define application dot properties. Okay, so okay, com dot read controller. Okay, very good. So in the resource we just go for new file general file, next, and we'll go for application dot properties, and here we just need this parameter. So this is memory, in memory database. This is the driver, admin, and H2 console. So basically by this parameter, we'll able to access database onto browser, and this is, it will show us how SQL query executed by JPA. Okay, so we are good, I believe. So let's go here and start the project. Okay, very good, it got started. So all this are okay. Now what we will do is we will go for Postman. So let me know if you guys want to understand Postman, how to use Postman, then I will try to make a video on Postman also. So for now I will not focus on Postman, I will just show you how we will call REST API. So here if you will see, then you have to select post method and URL, that is localhost 8080, and then what URI I have maintained in controller. So if you will see here, then slash employees in body. So basically it's a post. In body we have to give employee object details. So in employee object, if you will go here, then you have employee ID which is auto generated, so you need not to give this value. Go for employee name, employee is, So employee name, employee email, and employee age. Okay, so let's say these are the detail, and also in body you have to select raw data. Okay, so let's send this, and we'll say so right now your database is also ready. If you want, you can. Okay, what we will do is we will how we will access. So just go for localhost. This is H2 console. Sometimes you may have to update several times Maven. So just go with update project. Done. Okay. So actually last time it has not been saved properly. Maybe properties file. So it was giving some issue when trying to access H2 database. Now you can see H2 console is enabled, and since we have used, so basically here we have not used DDL sort of thing. There is one parameter called Spring JPA Hibernate DDL auto. So let's go with create. Okay, so what it will do is basically it will create a schema as soon as you are going to start the container, and it will drop the schema as soon you are shutting down your container. So be better to keep it update. So what it will do is it will not delete your schema when you are going to shut down your container. Also, if any change will happen to your schema, it will try to update the change at the time of a startup, but at the same time it will not delete data from the existing schema. Okay, so that's the beauty of update. So we'll go with update. If nothing is there, then automatic by default it will take create. Okay, so let's go with update, and now restart our services once again, and let's start now. Okay, so this is done. Now what we will do is we have to go for this URL /h2 console, so the actual server, and then /h2 console. Here you can see this needs to be there. From here we have to copy this guy, we have to copy here. Okay, JDBC URL driver by default will be there, username and the password whatever you kept there same you have to use, and then connect. So you can see this employee object got created since this is entity. Right now there is no data. So what we will do is we will just send, and we got 200, and we got in response data also we got employee object. So here you can see employee ID automatically created because we kept generated value annotated on employee ID. If you will see here, so it automatically created by JPA. So now if you will go to H2 and run selected, then you have seen this data got created, correct? Now next time when we will restart, this data will be lost. So let's go. Okay, then start once again. Spring Boot starter. Okay, now go here, connect, and sorry, and select this, run selected. There is no data. Why? Because it is in memory database. So what we will do now is we will, rather than using in memory, we will go with file. So make sure you are changing this when you are doing this project in your system. I will give my database related file system information. So what I'll do is I'll give this location for my database. So file, and then go for /h2db, and then we will go for what is a spring boot db. Okay, save, and then this is update, make sure that. And now what we will do is we'll go here and start once again. Sorry, it is already in use. Let's stop it. This port already in use. Now once again start. Okay, it's got started, and this is a. So now what we will do, and this will be, now we have to copy from here. Okay, so now this is, so there is nothing now, right now. So what we will do is we'll go for, it got created since it is a new database, so it got created with again one. Okay, now run selected. Okay, so we have the data now. If you will restart, then also you will have this data, which is good. So you can do it later on, but for now what we will do is we'll shut down this service, and then we will go with how to fetch data. Okay guys, so now we will go for retrieve employee, and we'll go for retrieve employee by email. Okay, so what we will do is we'll just copy it here, and here we will see, we'll give retrieve employee. Okay, and rather than using request mapping, so here you have to define URL and the type of method. So simply use, so they have defined different annotation to deal with this type of thing, is something like simply use get mapping or post mapping, like that you can use. So basically get mapping where you want data from server, so get mapping is good. So now we have to give the URL. So URL will be something like /employees, and then we have to give employee email. So like that. So basically in a request URI, how the request will come is employees / employee email, something like abc alok@abc.com, alok@xyg. So whatever email of that user will be, that will come. So now you have to fetch that employee email uh, here, and that you can make use of path variable. Okay, and path variable is string employee email. Okay, so this name should be same with this. If you want to keep other name, that's perfectly fine, but in that case you have to define it here. Okay, and then employee email. Okay, and here in REST app API service, you need to define retrieve employee method. So what we will do is, some names can be anything in service, so I'll just keep same. So here retrieve employee, and we will go for a string employee email, and REST, there are different find method. Okay, so dot, so 1 second, we have to go for repo dot find. There are different find all, find by ID. So there is nothing like find by email. So what we will do is we will create a method signature only in this repo interface. So something like public employee. Since email is unique, so it will return only a specific employee detail. So employee will work, and find by. So name should be very exactly same. Find by, and then whatever attribute name that you need to have it here, employee, and first letter make it capital, and a string email. So this name should be exactly same. Find by, and then attribute name first letter capital, and here you just have to, oh sorry, and this implementation should not be there, correct, because this is an interface. So automatically JPA will have its implementation. Okay, now you are good to find by employee email, good. So we are good. Path variable, just delete that, control shift O, done. Now in REST controller we are here, and REST API service dot retrieve, very good, and done. We saved it. Now what we will do, we'll start this application. Okay, it is started. Now what we need to do, we have to go here, and right now we are posting. So we cannot post again the same data. It will give error because this email is unique. Email needs to be unique. So if you will go here and send again, you can see 500 error you got, and here we got unique index. So there is constant violation, which is okay. Now let's say we'll change this to abc.com. Only email we will change. So this got created. Okay, so now what we need to do is, let's go with, we'll change this to get body. We don't need anything. If it is there, that's okay, but we don't need anything. And then employees al.kumar. So this is my email, and get, so it will return us the data. Okay, so this data send, so we got this data. If you will go with xyg.com, okay, another email, then it will give us another data, correct. So retrieve is working fine. Okay, retrieve is working fine. Also you can see the logs also here for each of your execution. So here you can see how Hibernate created the query. Okay, so now we are good with create, retrieve. Now we'll go with update. Okay, so in update, basically how this is going to happen is, first we will see whether that employee exists or not. Okay, if it exists, then we'll go for update. Okay, now how to do that? So first thing is, we'll check email. Okay, so a string email from, okay, email, and employee dot get employee email. Okay, this is the email of the employee email. We can say new employee. Okay, and now by using this, we will make a call to service layer to fetch the employee detail. So we will simply make a call to REST API service dot retrieve employee by, okay, it will give us employee object. Persisted, and okay, So what we are doing here is by getting email from this new employee, we are trying to fetch data from the database. If using this email we are able to find data, means data is there, means employee object is there with the same email. So in that case it will be a update request. So if employee persisted is not equal to null, then we'll go for SISO. It is a update request. Okay, it is a create request. Okay, very good. So if employee persisted is not equal to null, then what we have to do is basically this, from this guy we have to take the ID so that it will get saved against the same object. So what we will do is employee persisted dot get ID. We'll get the employee ID and we will save into the new employee whatever request we got. Employee, sorry, so employee dot set employee ID. Here we have to persisted dot get employee ID. This we need to save. Okay, employee ID, and then we just simply has to go with save employee. Okay, so it is very simple. Done. Now let's try this update request. Okay, so we have to restart. Okay, so let's run as a Spring Boot. It's started. Right now if we'll go here, the run selected, we have two. Okay, xyz.com and abc. So let's do same. Okay, so this body we have to go with the same data. So right now let's clean this. Okay, send, and you can see same data we got, avc.com. So it is an update request. We got it. So very simple. So we gone through create, update, retrieve. Now let's go with delete. Okay, so we'll have delete mapping. Okay, and URI should be same. Actually this will differentiate whether it's a delete or it's a retrieve by using HTTP method. So when the method will come with delete, then it's a delete request. So we just have to delete the user. So how we are going to, let's go to API service. This is our service. So delete, I believe delete will not delete. Here it will return void. So we just have to go with employee. We have to give the object detail and it will delete that object. So what we need to do here is in controller, first we have to retrieve the object. So what we will do is here create a method called delete employee. By using employee email, we will fetch employee. Okay. Repo dot find by employee email, and then what we will do is we will just this will return nothing void. And now what we need to do is employee repo dot delete employee. Done. And we just need to use this in our controller. There should not be any return. Okay. This is retrieve employee. This is delete employee. Done. So this method will help us to delete data from database. So what we will do is right now when we are going with this xyz.com, we are getting data like this. Employee ID is 1 and xyz.com. So what we will do is we'll just go with delete. And so I believe we have not restarted. So let's restart the service so that change will take effect. Okay. Now here run as Spring Boot. Okay, we are good. So just refresh it, log in once again, close it. Okay, we have 2, 1 and 3 employee ID. So let's delete this one. So send, and 200 response we got. Now what we will do is we will go with get. Same we will get. So we did not get anything. Okay. So if you will go for right now only abc.com is there, xyz.com is not there. Correct. So 200, but we did not get any response. There is no data. Okay, but if we will go with abc.com, then we have data. Now let's delete that as well. So go with delete option. So it's also got deleted. Now if you will go to H2 database, run selected, nothing is there. So what we will do is let's create some of the data. So we'll go with post employees. This is body. Okay, abc.com. This data looks good. So just send it. We got created. Okay. Now again go with xyz.com. Again go with pqr.com. So we have 3 data right now. So we have 3 data. Now, so the main important thing here is this controller class. So you can see you just have to annotate it with get mapping, post mapping, delete mapping, rather than using annotation of request mapping with different other parameter like value, method type and all. Why not use combination of URI and type of method by using this sort of annotation? So this is readily available and which you can make use of. You just have to annotate a controller with REST controller and you are all set to expose your API. Okay, And this is very much similar to MVC, what we are doing in MVC. It is just like a controller, but in this case, it is a API controller. Simple. So from controller, you will make a call to service layer, where service layer will make use of a repository in order to communicate to the database. If you will see here, we have to do nothing because we are using a Spring Data JPA, so it is very easy to use. When you will be using other database other than H2, then you just have to update data source URL and driver class. Okay, username is again whatever username is there for database instance, that you need to keep it here. Password and H2 console obviously will not be there. And this is a type of DDL. What sort of DDL you wanted to maintain, whether it's a create or update. There are different types of DDL. All it comes under Hibernate, and we will discuss more about it in our dedicated JPA class. And this is SoSQL, where it will show messages of SQL query execution. So guys, this video has agenda of high level discussion over REST API. So I have covered CRUD operation, create, retrieve, update, and delete, different operations of employee object through REST controller. Okay, so do let me know if you want me to cover something else. What I'll do is in my next video, I'll go for some extended and some advanced version of REST API. But for now, this is where you can start your REST API development using Spring Boot. Once again, if you have not subscribed to the channel, then please subscribe to the channel and like, share, and comment on videos.